From the campus of Yale University, this is Business Talk with Jim Campbell, nationally syndicated across the country on the Biz Talk Radio Network and coming to you from our flagship stations, Yale Radio WYBC and 1490 AM WGCH Greenwich. All talk and all business, 60 minutes of radio with leading figures from the world of business along with the business of politics and sports. And the man that built GE Capital, reinvented NBC, transformed the nonprofit world with Autism Speaks, now continuing his battle against deadly pancreatic cancer in honor of his lifelong partner and spouse, Suzanne Wright, who succumbed to the cancer. Bob Wright versus pancreatic cancer. We get an update on his Code Purple Now battle, and then a lot of change going on at his old hunting grounds. GE will pick Bob's brain. There's been a recent sharp drop in the stock price. We'll find out what's going on there. That's all tonight on Business Talk with Jim Campbell. Bob served as CEO of NBC Universal, CEO of GE Capital, vice chair of GE under Jack Welch. And he and his wife, Suzanne, co-founded Autism Speaks after their grandson was diagnosed with autism. He's now founder and chairman of the Suzanne Wright Foundation, taking on pancreatic cancer. He's on before about his book, The Right Stuff, from NBC to Autism Speaks. Welcome back, Bob. Great honor.
Thank you, Jim. I wish the book had the next chapter in it, which is the chapter we're in right now, dealing with pancreatic.
Yeah, I was going to say it's missing that chapter, and we're great. And last time we had you, we said this disease is so bad that we're going to hold you accountable for being successful. GE way, you promised to be back, and here you are. And I like this DARPA to HARPA. The business model looks brilliant. But before we jump into that, fill people in again about the deadly killer.
Well. Pancreatic cancer is the deadliest killer. There's no question of all the cancers. And the problem that I face with Suzanne is that nothing has changed in over 40 years. 91% of the patients die. There is no early detection tests or no curative treatments. And that's just black and white. And when you have a mortality rate like this, it's just horrible. And that is, and there's all kinds of reasons why the scientists say they can't do this, but the answer is we can fix this. There's something that can be done. Now, cancer is not the only thing alone. There are lots of human diseases that haven't been, no treatments have been formed, but not of this thing. 45,000 people die every year from pancreatic cancer. That's the same amount as the opiate crisis now that we have in the United States, which we're trying to form. We call it an emergency. We're trying to fix it. We don't call pancreatic cancer anything but another disease, and that's why I got into this. And I think the government plays a really essential role here. The NIH does basic research, but there are too many grants, too many institutions over too many years. They approach an emergency situation like a science project. We need translational research that makes a difference now. And so, from a business standpoint, we've under-leveraged the assets that the government has, whether it be work done at tons of data from basic research at the NIH, the NCI, the NSF, institutions across the country. But we haven't taken that and tried to put it together with big data and use the tools that are available today to make these things, really come across. And that's how I got involved with DARPA. What I should show you earlier, I got involved with the NIH on the Missing Project. That's a project for autism, where we needed whole genome sequencing because that's where the world is going. They wouldn't do it. They wouldn't fund it. I had to go out and basically raise $40 million to fund this project. And the NIH, which is well-funded by work that I did for them, wouldn't take this on, even though the money was available. And DARPA, ironically, is the gold standard for delivering high-impact results on difficult issues in the federal government. If we think about the way DARPA projects have fundamentally changed in the Department of Defense, the lives and the impact that it's had on individuals and people in this country, it's just enormous. And
we should say DARPA is responsible for inventing really GPS, the Internet,
right.
Stealth aircraft. So it's great. What does DARPA stand for? Tell folks.
DARPA stands for Defense Advanced Research Projects Agency. It's an agency, and it has its own credentials. It's a semi-autonomous agency that sits inside of the Department of Defense, and it is not burdened with most of the rules of government. The way it can operate, it doesn't give out grants. It enters contracts. It can contract with almost anyone: companies, individuals, universities, scientific groups. Google, Amazon, Microsoft. It can do all of that sort of thing. And what it does is it puts down dates. This is what has to get accomplished by a certain amount of time. The projects are designed to be accomplished in a few years, not 20 years. And if you miss your deadlines, you're apt to lose your contract or be terminated. They have the right to terminate a contract without obligation. It's a very tough program, and people are dying to be directors in these things because the projects are something that people may have been working on themselves, but they never had enough money. These are large projects. Instead of $1 million projects, they could be $30 million projects, or $40 or $100 million projects.
Is the
last one I remember was the prosthesis, the human hand that they have developed.
Put on all these poor kids that had met IEDs in Iraq. They're all over Afghanistan. A lot of this came from the Russians. Exactly.
Dropped all these things, but a lot of them are Army people. I mean, really young guys that lost a leg or an arm and all this sort of thing.
So there's a big contrast between the NIH then, right, and the DARPA, these bigger grants you talk about. They have program managers that are sort of the best and the brightest, and that are actually empowered, right, to drive stuff.
Well, they people line up to be a program manager at DARPA and would do the same at HARPA. These are people that are outstanding in some part of the field, and they felt like they've had a project they could have done. They couldn't get maybe they couldn't get the support at the university at the scale of it, or they couldn't get support at the corporation that they work for, so they come in. I should tell you, this is a personal matter. It's interesting. I had Merkel cell cancer in developed in '99, and I had a surgery in 2000 right away, and that's a killer. You could die from it because it's very hard to detect. And I had this crazy surgery that when I was in Memorial Sloan Kettering, they told me it was breast cancer surgery. It was kind of like a laugh, but it was true. And part of the surgery is the way the size of the hole they put in my head, and they also put radioactive ingredients in my body to flow through to isolate certain nodes that were going to be taken out in the course of the surgery to determine whether it had metastasized. It sounds very simple, but it's very complicated. And I got to tell you, that was successful, and I'm alive today. That same surgery is being performed today. We have a friend. We have somebody right in Fairfield right now. I don't want to. Who's in the hospital at Yale, and he's recovering from what is essentially the same surgery today, 17 years later. And that surgery, that technique was developed by DARPA in 1996. And a woman, an admiral in the Public Health Corps, Suzanne Blumenthal, was who's Ed Markey's wife by happenstance.
Interesting.
She was worked with DARPA to develop this technology, and they used work from the CIA to try to do the logarithms to determine which nodes would have to come out and how many and where and how fast, how you detect it and everything. And that's translational medicine. It's taking what we know, using other people in it. That's a perfect example of what DARPA does. We need this same thing in HARPA, which is just adding H. It's health, and as opposed to defense. And I have a partner now, and his name is Dr. Jeff Ling. And Jeff is an outstanding person. Now you got to just look him up on the internet. He's the most productive doctor, scientist you could ever imagine. He's a neurologist. He's a neurospecialist in critical care. He has appointments at Johns Hopkins. He was in the Army for 20 years. He's a colonel. He went 2 tours of duty, one in Afghanistan and one in Iraq, because he wanted to see medical work in the field, and he went there. And he is a DARPA expert, and he worked at DARPA. He did the prosthesis, the hand, and he wants to be the head of this, and he's my candidate to run this program, and he is dying to do it.
Oh, fascinating. You listen to Business
people
Talk.
Lined up with him right now to do this program.
All right, we're going to come right back, Business Talk with Jim Campbell, and do a little bit more on HARPA, so stay with us. We're back with Bob Wright, talking about an innovative new structure he wants to put in place called HARPA, a health agency modeled on the defense agency's DARPA. The first thing is what do you have to do to get a HARPA established, and where does it go in the government then?
Well, we would like that to go right inside of Health and Human Resources. That's where it belongs.
Okay.
And right now they don't have anything in Health and Human Resources which does anything like this. We have bench science. That's what the NIH does, and we have Medicare and Medicaid, which are paying for treatments, but they're not developing treatments. And this would be the ideal place for it. And people, since I've raised this issue, people have come to me and said, we should have done this 20 years ago. Why didn't we do it 20 years ago? Well, there's been pushback from the NIH. It doesn't want to see any group inside of Health and Human Services that's dealing with medical research that isn't them.
I was going to say, is there going to be a turf war then?
Yes. There is a turf war. There will be. Yeah.
Do you have to go through Congress then to get this? You need the president's support to drive it. How do you?
I have to have the president's support. Yes, absolutely. I do have bipartisan support in both the Senate and the House. But
even if NIH comes and lobbies against it.
Well, it's we'll see. But the reality is, this is not a competition. This is a different process. This is a organization. We're going to be dealing with big grants with very aggressive deliverables and timetables, and we're going to be reporting progress to the American taxpayer all the time. Mm-hmm. In other words, everything that we do is going to be reported, and it's going to be reported almost immediately. And everything's going to be open, and there's no waiting for a university to say you have to publish a paper before you can do it. No, it comes right out.
Is it going to be just pancreatic cancer initially?
No, it's open to anything. Hopefully, pancreatic cancer, especially the issue of early detection, is going to be there because there are so many things that can be done. We've got a long list of projects that are, not pancreatic cancer. And the White House Office of Innovation has been involved in this. We have the Cancer Moonshot, the 21st Century Cures Bill. These bills have been passed, and there's plenty of money available, to do this one. This is not near the cost of some of these other things.
Okay, this cultural and structural sort of revolution you're calling for, and the stats you guys sent me, prostate cancer has a 99% survival rate, breast cancer 90%, colorectal cancer 65%, and pancreatic is at 9%. Is that partly politics?
I think it's where pressure has been brought to the table. There are outstanding improvements in longevity for cancer over the last 25 years.
Okay.
It's debatable who is responsible for this. People in biotech would say they did it all, and people at NIH would say they helped. But it's very hard. But the reality is, it hasn't helped pancreatic cancer by 1 inch. Yeah. As a matter of fact, we've lost a little bit. It was a 9% mortality. That's always the kind of the wrong way to do this. The really way is it's 91% died.
Yeah.
Now it's 92 right now.
Yes.
So
it's going the wrong direction.
But there's nothing like that. No, there's nothing like that.
Now,
it's all by itself.
Let me ask you this. One of the things that HARPA...
Excuse me, but if we just had early detection, we could, if we improve early, 85% of the people that get diagnosed are stage 4.
Yeah.
Jim, and that means they're going to die.
That's the whole ball game. And I guess you're hoping that AI.
If you improve that by 10%, you save 5,000 lives right off the bat.
Yeah, and I think that part of HARPA's mission would be to develop artificial intelligence, right, that would help those tools.
Well, we've already got several. We've got 2 competing structures for early detection. One is a micro MRI approach, and the other is blood work. And blood work's been around for a long time, but nobody seems to have enough money to finish the job on blood work. And we should get into it. What HARPA will do is take on something that's really difficult, but they will also say after a period, we got to stop. It's not worth it. In other words, we're too far away from the science or something like that. But unlike the guys in the lab that want to go on forever, they'll just say no. It's that. We move on.
It's got to be some deliverables.
There's a yes or no here in a certain period of time.
I know one of the goals of HARPA is to de-risk innovation. What does that mean in your eyes?
It's to show that you can take pieces of things that have already been developed and put them together and make something happen. Like the early diagnosis from a single drop of blood. There's a project, a prosthetic eye that can communicate directly with the brain. That's something that many people have looked at. And that comes out of DARPA. It's not a question. It doesn't fit DARPA, but it could fit HARPA. A portable MRI machine to detect diseases at a microscopic level. A technique to cure enzyme deficiency disorders through gene therapy. See, these are connecting dots. These are connecting things that are out there, but that have not been actually connected together. That's what DARPA is so good at doing.
How do you see this process flowing before something is actually getting out there? How long?
Well, we have to get approval at the White House. There are people in the White House that are very much aware of this. We're not silent about it. We've done a lot. We're going to have some piece of legislation come out of Congress. I believe that we have a very strong bipartisan support group to do this because this doesn't really conflict with the NIH. It adds value to what Health and Human Services can do.
Will you have DARPA support? I mean, talking about this.
Well, I'm certainly going to have DARPA support because a lot of the people I'm talking about came from DARPA.
The Innovation Office you said that you worked with, is that Jared Kushner's thing?
Yes.
Okay,
well, so I don't want to exaggerate it. They're well aware of this.
Okay.
Yeah, they're well aware of this. There are a number of people in the White House that are involved in both in science and medical that are aware of this, and to the extent that I can say to you, they were all very enthused about it.
And you could see something coming out of a HARPA in, 2 years, 18 months?
Well, we have to get it formed. You have to actually put it together. We need this to be approved and to be operational in the sense of moving forward at least in the next 2 months.
All right. Before we get to GE in the next segment, we finish out here in the last minute. How overall is the progress going on Code Purple now and your focus, et cetera, or is it all HARPA?
Well, this is the focus now of Code Purple. We have isolated the best opportunity that we could find after going through kinds of different options. This is the best thing I could do and spend my time, my money, and my effort and others to get going because we can really make a difference in pancreatic cancer, and that's life-saving. And it's not life-saving 25 years from now. It's life-saving. A real, honest-to-God early detection would just save lives immediately.
And you're going to be able to say someday that 9% number is a much better number.
I'd like to see that number down to about 60% or something in my time.
Well, that would be transformational.
I can't believe that we can't do that.
How can
the people I'm dealing with believe it themselves? So
how can people help out? Do you need money given, or do they go?
Well, I could use some money to help the program. Yes, this is an expensive thing to be doing. There's a lot of expense in all the kind of people that are around it, the websites and all that. And but I think in the end, I'm going to need people to support any legislation and get to their congressmen and senators and say, hey, why not? Why aren't we doing this? Why haven't we done it 20 years ago?
All right. It's the CodePurpleNow.org is where you can go to the website. On Facebook.com is Code Purple Now as well. We've been talking with Bob Wright. We're going to move to GE when we get back. We're back. Former NBC CEO Bob Wright, a GE man for his whole career. And GE's got a new CEO after 16 years, and it's got a stock price that is somewhat collapsed. And we're trying to figure out how bad things are at GE. And first of all, give us the big picture.
Well, the big picture is there are two kinds of investors out there today regarding GE. They're the people that own the stock, like me, which are really, we're crying.
Hurting.
We're hurting. It's a $20 stock now, and it's down 35% since the beginning of the year, and it's really hurting. And then there's another group of people out there that are investors that are looking at a company that's selling for $20, which was selling for $30 only a year ago. And they're saying, well, wait a second, doesn't this company have really good oil and gas entities? They also have a huge healthcare business. They also have a financial organization that provides financial support to all of these entities. So is this a time for if people that haven't been in it, this may be a great time to get in it. And for those of us that are in it, we kind of cry, you know. But so that's what we're seeing right now.
The point you're making is that the future is still before GE. We're not in some kind of a seminal, going out of business kind of thing. I exaggerate.
Well, those businesses that they have that I just described are mega businesses, and they are extremely well regarded around the world. So they're not going away. Now, there's cyclicality associated with them, and energy's been slow, and oil and gas has been slow, but the aircraft engine business is not slow. They're a top performer, and the business is huge. So they have to clean up the balance sheet. A lot of things have happened. That you have a new CEO. He appears to be very talented, and he's been around a long time. He spent 12 years outside the United States, so he's very much an international person as well. He's a graduate of Fairfield University, and also a graduate of University of Pennsylvania Wharton School with an MBA. And he's a very talented guy. Sure. I think he's taking all these issues on head on. He doesn't want to be telling people a year from now he just discovered this and that and the other thing. So he's trying to get everything on the table. And I think it's a lot to take. I anticipate there will be a reduction in the dividend because the rate now is approaching 4.5% or something. They need cash. They need to conserve their cash, or at least mind it. I expect that. I think the market does. I think that's part of the pricing. But the one thing we haven't been talking about too much is the software involved in the project that Immelt was so associated with in terms of industrial software. And maybe that's taking a little bit of a back seat right now because you really have to get the balance sheet aligned with in a very transparent way with the market.
And I have to say on the digital industrial strategy, I think it's a brilliant strategy. And GE was very open and did a show about it with me and basically admitted that it is a leap of faith. And to hear a conservative big business company say that they're willing to take that kind of a dip, you got to give them Immelt a lot of credit. Now, having said that about Immelt, you're too classy, I'm sure, and it saddens me because he went to Dartmouth. He was there when I was at the Tuck School there. Is his tenure a failure?
There's a lot of reasons why, but it's certainly marked. He came in with on the day he took over, the stock was $36 because we had 9/11, and and it went all the way down to $5 because when the collapse of the before that it went down. When the energy business collapsed, so it went down to like $22, and then all of a sudden it went from $22 to $5 in 2009. Yeah. But that was an issue because they had to raise a ton of money to support GE Capital because the GE Capital became a national bank, and they had to put tremendous amount of capital. We had insurance problems. We had all kinds of problems, and he's probably his biggest criticism will be that he bought at the peak and he sold at the bottom.
Now, he moved the headquarters to Boston to get to a more innovative environment, and also because Connecticut is so mismanaged, unfortunately. Sold his house, moved up there, and then within a few months he's out. Does that imply that he was ousted or something? Why would he have done that? and sold his house and moved up there, and then had to retire so quickly thereafter.
Well, I think he wanted to do that for a long time. They did a big shopping tour as to where to go. I don't think it was like this. I don't think it was anti-Connecticut. They had a very good. My understanding is they had a very good tax situation.
Yeah. It was definitely for the innovation. That was people in Connecticut.
He thought that the company was not well known enough for the quality of its engineering and innovation,
exactly.
And being 60 miles from New York, we're in a state which is now not known for that either. You have United Technologies is probably the other leader. That going to Boston would be a shot in the arm, especially since they wanted to really develop a digital world for engineering.
But now let's talk about this more substantive business stuff, and this one you can relate to because they were your businesses. Yep. They've unloaded NBC and GE Cap, and they were great cash generators, and they've got now these great long businesses, digital, industrial, but their long cycle, the current cash flow estimate went from $15 billion to $7 billion. That's a huge drop. Did they unload too much of the cash generators? Are they in a big problem here?
Well, they certainly, in the case of NBC, they weren't confident that NBC would be successful going forward. They thought that digital was going to really hurt NBC in the near term. Now, we were a huge cash generator for the company. Probably at that point in time, maybe the strongest one.
And GE Capital would be next then, right?
Yes, but GE Capital was lightly regulated at that point in time.
Good point.
Then it became heavily regulated, and that changed all. I think they missed the timing when you're getting rid of businesses that do have a lot of cash generation, and you're buying businesses that are going to have it but not near term. You're going to have a big valley in there. And they misread that valley meaning lower cash flows, but yet that's going to impact earnings. All of a sudden, they've made a lot of investments. They turned out to be much longer-term investments, like oil and gas, than they ever anticipated.
Yeah, good.
And they got rid of pieces that were huge income generators for them.
Now, you mentioned, we talked about John Flannery. He's the new guy there. Are you bullish on him?
Yes, I am. I don't see... I didn't know him personally. He came into GE Capital in 1987, and I had already left. That was just when I left GE Capital. But he has a very strong reputation among people.
Is he going to make GE smaller?
I think he's going to make GE smaller and probably larger in the future. That's my guess.
All right, one other thing, and this is probably unfair, but you were in Hollywood for 20 years. Did you know this Harvey Weinstein guy was a creep?
I could tell you that I met many people that I thought probably were involved in a lot of things that I wouldn't have approved that they were with me. But what's happened here is even worse than I could possibly have thought.
And you don't see you're in your period you didn't see the amount of sexual harassment, discrimination, abuse of women that appears to be coming out of Hollywood.
Well, I wasn't numb to it. I knew things were happening, and I did see things. In our case, we thought we maintained pretty good control, and we took action when we saw it. But the reality of it is now, when you have a case that comes out like this, it opens up the doors for all kinds of things. And I'm not meaning that these people, the men or women who are complaining, are making anything up. I'm saying that it's a shame they didn't come forward. They were bullied. They thought their careers were going to be damaged. It's a very tight place in Hollywood, and it's all falling now right on top of Hollywood.
So as we finish up, basically bullish case on GE if you're not into it, right? If you're not into the stock. Otherwise, you're going to have to ride this out.
Well, it's certainly an opportunity for a smart investor. I mean, you look at the quality of stuff that we have there, and it's a little hard for me to say I want to double down and buy more.
Now, as we finish up, how optimistic are you on all the work that you're doing at Code Purple now?
When you go into things like this, Jim, you have to be optimistic. I believe that we can make a real difference, especially in the initial area of early detection, and I think we can also make a difference in curative therapies. They have not focused on curative therapies. There's a lot of stuff out there that small things we can pull together. We'll find out, but I believe the early detection that's the first thing on my list.
I'm looking forward to watching that number 9 go up to 60 because I think you'll do it. And we'll have you back for the 4th time for another accountability section. Always enjoy you, and you're doing obviously great. Everything you've ever done, you've innovated and reinvented. So I think that's a good sign here.
Well, this is a challenge, but this is life now. We're dealing with people's lives now, not. This is a chance to
not
save
TV
people's
shows.
lives.
Yeah.
My wife could have been. She could have been alive today if we had an early detection program.
And I remember you telling me that she was very near death,
yep.
and she told you, Bob, go on and live your life, and you said, no, I've got to go do this, and she said, thank you.
Thank you.
It was a great,
held my hand. Yep.
Great moment. We've been talking with Bob Wright. We're going to move back to GE when we get back. We've been talking with Bob Wright. We're going to move to GE. I think Jeff's done a great job on redoing the portfolio, but an interesting thing has come out of that I'll talk to you that affects cash flow in that the businesses like the ones you had that generated a lot of cash have been spun off. But let's save that.
We were the largest cash generator in the company, I think, at the time.
Yeah, but the interesting thing is that stuff's been gotten rid of, and I wonder if they understood the consequences on the cash flow.
They had to know it. They're not dumb people.
But they they sold all the cash generators.
I know. They thought, I think mistakenly, I don't know, that they were going to make these big investments, and somehow or other, these big investments were going to create early cash that would be offsetting the loss from GE Capital.
Yes.
And it seems to me that that whole thing got bungled.
Yeah, it's struggling. I will say I'm a huge fan of the digital industrial strategy.
We haven't heard much of that in the last 2 months.
Well, I'll ask you about Flannery. The guys up there that I talked to that were very high on him, but I just hope he's not just a cost cutter.
No, I don't think he is. I think he's. I don't think that's the case.
I was going to say, you didn't sell your stuff, or you?
I kept a lot of it for my children.
Yeah.
And it's down 35% this year. My God.
Yeah. It's just, I remember when it happened to Sandy Weil. I mean, his Citibank went down like $1.5 billion. They come back, but it's kind of scary to live through it.
No, it's awful. It's awful. This would be the second time around now.
Yeah, you're right. Yeah,
actually, the third time around. I mean, it collapsed in 2002 with 9/11 and everything else, and the power business collapsed at that point in time. We had a bunch of terrible orders. They were kind of phony. They never materialized.
Oh.
And a lot of people made money, selling power to governments, and then they didn't want to pay their bills and so forth. It's a whole long thing.
The Schenectady guy told me that too. That a lot of these governments just don't pay. Or they really stretch it out, and they end up making no money on the what do you call it, the hardware, and it's just the service end of the business. And
well, this is the third major collapse of the stock in the last 17 years. Third major collapse. The first collapse was between Jack Welch. This last year, the stock went down $170 billion when he was the CEO.
Yeah,
people forget that. That's a big number.
Yeah. Well, I also think Welch. It was so overvalued then.
Right.
GE had a multiple of 32, which is
actually it was a multiple of 40.
Okay, yeah, which is ridiculous.
I know.
It was, and that's why I feel bad a little bit for Melt on that because he gets beat up for the stock. But
he wasn't. This guy's more outspoken. I like that.
Flannery
Melt was covering for Jack, and he was kind of like being very polite and everything.
Yeah.
This guy's saying, hey, here's what I got. Here's the hand I got.
I have to say, I bought stock after the 2008 crash in GE. So I did well there. I bought it at 12, and I was thinking of buying it at 6.
Yeah.
I didn't have the
You probably couldn't get it at 6 because it wasn't much market, but you probably could have gotten it at 8 or 9.
Yeah.
I don't think 12 was a pretty good idea.
12's a pretty good idea. Actually, it was all on paper that it looked good.
Yeah.
It hasn't materialized, so.
Well, I'm stunned because I have a lot of GE stock, and as I said, I thought it was my safest investment.
Yeah.
I wasn't expecting miracles, but I was expecting a 3.5% dividend.
And that's going to go away. Yeah, you're right. They're going to get
Well, it's 4 now. It's over 4.
Yeah. No, but I'm saying it takes 2 minutes.
That's going to go away.
Yeah, 2 minutes of analysis. They have negative cash flow after the dividend.
Well, that can't be.
You can't do that.
But wait a second. That cash flow has to be temporary. That's not indicative of the assets they have.
But there's no way you can keep a dividend going with a negative cash flow unless you're just irresponsible.
No. We're going to hear the presentation of this on the 13th. He's going to address these issues and some other issues. So there's one hidden issue and it's not hidden. I'm not saying this because I have any inside information,
right.
But he mentioned the fact he was concerned about some assisted living liabilities that GE has been carrying around for years after we sold the insurance business.
Oh.
And we kept it. Now, I was aware that we kept some liabilities, but not liabilities that we were worried about.
Oh.
And, liabilities in insurance and assisted living are very much like pension liabilities, where you have to you associate a certain return that you're going to have to generate to cover them. And you hope that return is going to be easy to do, therefore you're going to have profit. So maybe they wrote it up like most, a lot of companies you talk to are still have their pensions funds at 7%.
Yeah,
or
8%
annually. You can't do that.
No, you can't do that. You're unfunded like crazy.
Well, that's what happens. So this may have broken out here in the last couple of 3 years, and it didn't get picked up. But I actually can't believe that GE's finance people wouldn't have covered this by now. In other words, before Immelt left, but they didn't. Apparently, we're going to hear some more about that.
Whew. There's got to be some good news somewhere there.
Well, that's not. He mentioned something on the again, this is not inside information.
Yep.
He mentioned that there was a $25 billion liability.
For that?
Yes.
Well, then they got to sell that.
But that's okay if you're an insurance company and you have it covered. It's okay. It's a liability goes with the asset. But he mentioned it in a way that sort of said, I don't think we can cover this.
Well, and also if you're not reserved properly, which is what you're really talking about, then
that's what I'm talking about.
Yeah, you got to fix the balance sheet with that.
Right. So. Anyway.
I'm glad he gets the big bucks to have to.
Well, he's going to get something. I don't know if he's going to get the big bucks. I think the big bucks all went to Immelt. They say Immelt's walking away with $200 million of GE stock. More $100 million of GE stock and a $200 million retirement program.
Really?
Well, that's public. That's not me. I didn't.
No, I know. It's just stunning.
I don't know. But those things aren't really the issue here. That's all history. The issue is what's going forward here.
Yeah. And I feel bad for a guy who only gets 2 or 3 months to put it together like he's gotten. But, the market's going crazy.
Well, I'll tell you, he would be the most notorious graduate of Fairfield University.
Yeah.
But he also claims, he also has an imprimatur of the Wharton School.
Yeah, well, something, too. It's going to end up being better to have followed Immelt than Vince Lombardi. Right? I mean, that's what Welch, is Vince, is. Yeah, so this is going to be, it's going to be a little bit of a lower standard. So sometimes coming in when things are at the bottom is a good thing.
I like that.
Thanks again to Bob Wright,
as
always. We love your time. We'll get you back for a 4th time, Bob.
Okay.
Take care.
Thank you, Jim.
Bye-bye.